So our next speaker is a man who has a lot of experience, especially when it comes to business technology and digital payments. He is an expert with this field with over 17 years experience in IT payments strategy at a national scale. Seun was instrumental in the transformation of retail banking and digital payment services, working with various stakeholders, including African leading banks, fintechs, PSPs, PISP, and mobile network operations. He has worked at various levels with the Nigerian interbank settlement system, transforming real-time payments in Nigeria. Seun is currently the Chief Operations Officer at Integrated Payment Services Limited here in Kenya, with oversight on technology, operations, and recently led the modernization of the real-time payments infrastructure for Kenya Bankers Association. Seun is a certified fintech practitioner with over 10 speaking appearances and panelists at Africa Focus Fintech and Digital Payments conferences. Degrees to Seun credits includes he's got a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, and also he's got a Master's in Computer Systems and an MBA from Ladoke Akintola University of Technology, University of Ibadan, and also University Ilorin, respectively. He is seasoned to the bone and marrow, and we are glad to have him here. So over to you, Seun, as you take us through this next discussion and break it down for us. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks very much, Ian, for the introduction. Briefly, I'll be speaking around building an operational resiliency within the banking industry and banking ecosystem, and also how banks can build an operational efficiency post-COVID-19. We could see in the past couple of years, precisely around 10 to 20 years now, we've actually seen evolution of banking. So banking actually started around creation of credit facilities, branch-based banking. Banks started, setting out branches, rolling out branches. Brick and mortar banking services were actually the order of the day. About 5-10 years later, we've started seeing banks also investing so much in digital platforms, in e-banking platforms, enhancing the capability of staff, investing in technology infrastructure, and all that. Now, that moved from, investment in technology infrastructure to digitalization of banking and payment services. We now see banks also rolling out a lot of branchless banking, initiatives. We've seen a lot of banks today rolling out self-service ATM machines, allowing consumers to have less physical interactions with bank client service officers. We've seen a lot of banks today that allows digital submission of checkbooks, lodging of complaints electronically and all that. Now, if you could see how this has actually moved over time, we see that banks have actually built resiliency around technology, around the people, around the processes, around service innovation, around product innovation and all that. However, the big question here is this. Is this actually sufficient, and is this actually meeting the expectation of the 21st century consumer? Given the fact that we now have challengers. We have challenger banks, we have new banks, we have fintechs, we have payment service providers that are actually creating a replication of banking and services actually being given by all these ecosystem players. Now, how can banks actually, get into this space, build some sort of resilience for themselves, and also be competitive at the same time and profitable? Now, in the last 10 years, we've seen a very significant, in the last 2 years rather, we've seen significant investment in African fintech. For instance, in the last 2 years, we have about over 2 billion USD invested in fintechs across Africa. The three key African continents being Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. Now, the whole essence of actually building this capability of these fintechs is to be able to give, direct to consumer proposition, give flexibility around products and services that are being given by banks, take away the rigidity and introduce a lot of agility so that it can actually foster quicker to market product launch, and also improve on go-to-market proposition by these fintech players. Now, this has actually created some sort of competition for banks, if we may see it as a competition, but at the same time, it has actually created some sort of collaboration between banks and fintechs. Just as we have seen in different countries, we have seen in the UK where we have regulation, supporting open banking, supporting bank fintechs collaboration. We've seen that in Australia. We have seen that in India with UPI, and we have seen that also in a lot of countries across Africa. Now, for banks to be able to build a resilient operation, they must actually see themselves collaborating with competitors. Now, not just competing with competitors, but collaborating with competitors who are more agile, who have a sophisticated and using emerging technologies such as AI, machine learning, RPA, and all that to actually build their tech stack to be able to roll out products and services as quickly as more than legacy infrastructure that a lot of banks are actually using. Now, how can banks actually reposition themselves and build operational efficiency? And that's what I can actually call a banking of the future. Like I mentioned earlier, banking evolution actually started from investment in branches, setting up of branches, moving to presentation of consumer loans, credit facilities, and all that. Now banks investing in digital platforms, now into payment infrastructure. Now, how can banks now build a purpose-driven future post-COVID-19? Now, if you could see from April 2020, we could see a sporadic increase in digital payments. There were a lot of less physical interaction of consumers with bank branches. During COVID era, a lot of branches were closed down. A lot of consumers actually were using digital platform. A lot of merchants, a lot of billers, a lot of businesses actually resulted into using digital platforms to actually keep the business and going. So we've actually seen that trend coming into place, and that's going to be the norm in future to come. So if you could actually see this transition, you will actually now see that consumers are now more comfortable and moving towards a digital-oriented platform. Now, seeing that, we've seen banks also to be able to meet up with this pace of consumer need. They also need to do a lot of things which I can call critical success factors for banks to be able to build an operational and resilient banking and payment services. First and foremost, banks need to see how they can modernize and transform their payment infrastructure, banking and payment infrastructure. This is given. We've seen a lot of banks across different countries of the world using a lot of legacy infrastructure, and the pace at which transformation and modernization is going, that requires a lot of banks not to only invest in the technology infrastructure, but to also invest in the people and the processes that actually underpins the implementation of the technology stack or driving the technology stack. Now, that's one of the critical success factors that banks need to put in place to ensure that they actually prepare themselves in building an operational resilient future. Now, secondly, and I think I mentioned it a bit earlier on, banks need to see how they can actually collaborate with competitors. Not seeing fintechs, not seeing PISPs, not seeing PSPs, not seeing MNOs as competitors, but more like collaborators. So there must be a lot of strategy, and engagement, strategic engagement, activity that needs to be ongoing across the banking ecosystem. So we could actually see a lot of collaboration happening between fintechs and banks. We can also see a lot of collaboration happening between MNOs, MNVOs, and a lot of PSPs or PISPs. Now, that's a very critical success factor that banks also needs to put into place to build an agile and resilient operating model. Now, thirdly, the gold mine of today, which is actually data. We've seen a lot of modernization initiatives being taken place, across the banking industry globally. Today, we've seen data as actually, we've seen various data protection regulation being churned out in Europe. We've seen a lot of open banking initiatives that are actually coming up where banks are actually mandated to collaborate with fintechs. So the gold mine of today, which is actually data, needs to be seen as an enabler to actually build a resilient and the future of purpose-driven banking and payment services. Now, what is data expected to actually do? I see this in two folds. The first one being descriptive, creating some sort of descriptive analysis, and the second one creating some sort of predictive analysis. So data is expected to enable banks to actually have descriptive and predictive analysis of their consumer behavior and consumer spending. Now, this will actually enable banks to be able to build an agile and customer-centric solution, and also incorporate agile culture into their implementation, because you can predict consumer behavior, you can predict consumer spending, and you can actually use that to actually predict how you can actually build purpose-driven payments, banking products, solutions that can actually be centric around consumer needs. Now, these are some of the things we've seen a lot of fintechs actually, leveraging on and be able to build and roll out products and solutions, and they have a quicker, go-to-market action plan being implemented. Now, these are some of the critical success factors I've actually seen to be able and to enable banks to build a purpose-driven, and resilient banking and payment services in the future. I've actually been involved in a lot of transformation and modernization initiatives across 2 key African markets, and it will be my delight to actually take this conversation further with the audience of this event. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.